And as the Guardian Legend soundtrack trails off and Kid Icarus kicks up, we're gonna kick off this stream. So welcome everybody. Happy to have y'all here on another beautiful Thursday. The music just stopped for some reason. That was really cool. Alright. Back at it. There's always sound issues. Always. Always. Well, welcome everybody. Again, thank you for joining us on stream today. I am stoked to have a face that y'all have never seen before on our streams with me this week. Andrea, would you like to introduce yourself and say hello?
Hello, so I'm Pennsylvania number 2, and Chrissy over here is Pennsylvania number 1. My name's Andrea. I'm very vocal about unionizing, and I am a narrative lead and project manager, and happy to be here, also helping out the strategy committee. We're just trying to raise awareness as much as we can about, because we say unionizing, but we don't really know what goes behind it, like what's step 1, 2, 3. So any questions about that, put them in the chat. We're here to answer them. But yeah, that's about it for me.
That's awesome. I'm so glad to have you here. You're a narrative designer, right?
Narrative.
Yes, you said that. I'm just repeating what you said because I love to really hammer it home. But I'm so happy to have you here today. So what we're talking about this week is we're talking about what the current culture is in games, and maybe some assumptions that we're making about the folks that we work with, and how can we get to the truth and the reality of this situation and empower ourselves to organize, regardless of what our assumptions might be, right? So Andrea, can you tell me a little, here's an off-the-cuff question for you, but were there any assumptions that you had about organizing unionism before you got involved, or any preconceived notions you had?
Had I done unionizing before? No. Complete beginner over here. But it's one of those where, again, the time, so I was affected by the Fire Red Games layoffs, and before that, I believe we had there was the Amazon one, and there was the big Google one. So there were calls for unionizing. And SAG-AFTRA, of course, was an ongoing thing. But before the SAG-AFTRA one, I had no idea what it was. And so the thing is, I saw the later stages, if you would, of a unionizing process, where you have the strikes, you have the deal, and somebody to make the deal with. But here, I'm sort of, I'm laid off, and then it's sort of okay, so SAG-AFTRA has the AMPTP to sort of make a deal with. Who do we have? Right? You start having all of these questions, and you start sort of sitting around what can you do? But I'm also I'm in the Discord server, I might as well just ask, what can I do? And then and again, Developers Guild Discord server, I just sort of asked, hey, how can somebody who I'm not in a workplace right now that I can unionize, but I am a game developer and I would like to help out the unionizing effort. So how do I go about it? And that's sort of like how we ended up here.
Awesome. Yeah. Um, Again, I'm so glad to have you as a part of the team and ultimately helping um, organizing game workers as a whole. Because again, what we're trying to achieve here is a national game worker union for all the game workers in the United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico to join, um, so that y'all can have the protections and that a union contract can provide. Um, so one of the things I did want to talk about tonight when we're talking about this, like the current culture of how things are going in games right now, um, I feel like one of the biggest topics we talk about for game workers is like overworking and crunch and burnout and all of that stuff that is associated with really wanting to overpromise and also overdeliver to your boss.
I'm smiling because if the people that I know are in the stream are in the chat, I know they're gonna roast me because guess who crunches regularly without wanting to? In 2022, we left that behind.
No.
Me. Um, I went to art school. We've been through this chat already. Like,
Oh, yeah, don't get me
I
started
was
about
doing
art
like the
school.
count, and regarding like overperforming, I remember like if I've done the count, I have burnt myself out 4 times already.
Oh my god.
Because recently I've been asked, sort of, how is it that you're doing so many things? And I'm like, boundaries. I'm setting boundaries that I didn't set before. And something that is surprisingly common that not a lot of, I mean, it's an open secret. Like, you know, everybody does it, but you're not really posting about it on Twitter. You know that people that sort of like say they're offline on Slack and then they start working until 4 a.m. And it wasn't just me. There will be times where, you know, like you'd be at 4 a.m. and then you notice your coworker. Again, an open secret of the industry where you know that folks do it. At the time in 2022, my mentality was that surely if you overperform and you become this invaluable worker that they cannot function without, they're not going to lay you off. But if there's anything that layoffs sort of like teach you, it's that they don't care. Not to be harsh, but to be honest, which is different. If they are laying off director level folks who manage the processes, not to say that one discipline is bigger than the other, but if they are, you know, laying off folks from like different levels across the board, that's just, it's going to happen to anyone. There's a very common phrase when regarding layoffs, which is it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when it's going to happen to you.
That's stressful.
Yes. But that's where we're
Yeah,
that's where boundaries come in. Where like it's a weird way of like you sort of like come to terms with reality. Like it's a matter of when. But in the meantime, you're setting firm boundaries. If you have to deliver 3 things that day, you deliver 3 things that day, and that's it. If you do that early, you leave early because you finish your work early. Like enjoy that work-life balance. And if you're laid off, then at least you retain your sanity.
I mean, yes.
You leave a Colombian out of work. Like I had an existential crisis. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, oh my god, what am I staying up until 4 a.m. for? That's not a spreadsheet. Okay.
100%.
So I'm just letting people know there is a way. Just sort of like accept that this is how the industry is gonna be for a bit, but set your damn boundaries.
Well, to that point, like this is how it is, right? It doesn't have to be.
It does not have to be.
This doesn't have to be the way that it is. We can change it. That is not, however, an easy solution. If it were easy, we would have done it already, right? Organizing itself is not easy, but if we do nothing, we leave all the power in their hands to do everything for us. And that includes determining when the hammer falls, right? Um, but you know, and you're talking about it a little bit here, but like, what about it? What about what about working in games makes you feel that pressure to go above and beyond in that way? By at least when you were doing it before, like, what was it about your work that was kind of like making you think I gotta stay up till 4 a.m. to do this thing, you know?
I can speak on my own experience and what I think a lot of juniors have experienced because you've taught art students. You know what this is, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are two reasons why people will overperform. Um, I can explain the junior level one, and then I can sort of like get to what I believe to be the senior level one. The junior level one was, oh my god, I have this job that hundreds of people were craving. I have to be the best because you go through all of these rejections, you go through all of these rounds, you go through these months of like job hunting, at times longer. Like if we want to be sort of like, granular about it, I was in the gaming industry since 2018, but didn't land my first role till 2022. Yeah. Um Timelines are weird. Or 2021.
I know, right?
The point being that I didn't no yeah, 2022, my bad. The point being that it took a while, right? It took a while for me to have a portfolio and stuff. So you dedicate your um you have this passion for years, and when you finally land the dream job, you need to perform the best that you can possibly be. And what people don't realize is that the best performance is a healthy performance, but you don't know that early on. That's why I overperform, because it's sort of like I also, was in the Firaxis games that made the Civilization games. Then they released a Marvel game. Like I was surrounded by these amazing developers, and I didn't want to let any of them down. Because if they can do all these amazing things, then hopefully I can make something just as amazing. Um, that was like the pressure that you feel. And there's also sort of like power dynamics, right? Like you have people who have shipped titles. You have people that have been there since like the micro pro days. So why even bother counting how many ship titles they have, right? Um, and you're working with them. You're working with them, and you haven't shipped a title. So whatever it is that you're working on has to be good to meet up with this. Like it's unreasonable, but early on you're not really aware of that. So I think that would be the reason where it's like, you don't want to disappoint folks and you want to do your best in this dream job. What I have noticed on the other side of the spectrum from senior level folks, because what I just described, I think, sort of like encompasses the art student and like entry level experience. You work your ass off to try and get a job, and then when you do get a job, you're overperforming and you're burning yourself out and you don't even know it. Like it's dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Um, on the other side of the spectrum, you have senior level and leads who are doing their best. So the people they have to mentor, in essence, don't burn themselves out. For example, like I'm a narrative lead, so I do sort of like watch over my mentee a lot, and I do sort of like do my best to like set the boundaries, but then also make sure that they're not overworking themselves. Make sure they don't have like, 50, 60-hour work weeks, right? Um, and a lot of people just don't realize what mentors go through sometimes, where like they're the ones working, like a Sunday night to sort of like, set up the plan, set up like, what needs to be announced and this and that. Or is there anything that I can, take on my workload from away from like, this junior so they can have a 40-hour work week, but then I don't. It's not, say, like a monolith, of course, of an experience, but it is an anecdote that I have heard repeated.
Mm-hmm.
And some people manage it differently, where like for example they might have a day where they work, I don't know, 10 hours instead of like 8. Then there might have a day where, like, they work 6 hours to try to balance it out. Every person that I know sort of like manages it differently, but there seems to be sort of like, yeah, they've done crunch. Like at a senior level, like when you have been in the industry for that long, you have gone through crunch, period.
Yeah. Um, I feel like a lot of people think that you have to cut your teeth, you know, um,
Mm.
to make it. But we shouldn't have to do that. Work is work. Um, Sword Brother Sorios in the chat says that bit about trying to be valued with companies is why people are quiet quitting. What's the point of company loyalty when they will take advantage of the hard workers showing they are willing to take the abuse, especially when you can go work for a competitor for better conditions? Yeah, you're right on the nose there, Sword Brother.
Mm.
The big one of the bigger challenges that we have is that um, a lot of folks get fed up with where they're working and they just go work somewhere else because they think
Hmm.
I'll take a gamble on this new place being better than continue to work at this place that's treating me poorly. Um, and it might be better. It might be the same. It might be worse.
Mm.
Um, so what we're ultimately proposing here is the opportunity to change all of that and improve everything across the board for game workers as a whole. Um, but we have to do that's a slow and steady progress, right? And
Hmm.
right now we're at the very beginning of it, and we got to get folks who are working at studios to organize at their studios so that we can form those protections. Um, because without that, we're still leaving it up to our employers to make decisions for us.
And you're losing essentially generational knowledge. Generational, right? Because um, I remember that, can't recall the name, but one of the people that was laid off from Riot, that was a novel layoff, and nobody deserves for it to happen, of course. But one in particular is one of the three original writers of everything in like Runeterra, which is like, the huge world that Riot game bases, like League of Legends and this and that. One of the three original writers for that was laid off. You're not getting that knowledge back. That is knowledge of almost like decades at this point, right? And so the lore that this person might have had in their brain, or sort of like any details regarding specific story, specific champion backstories, because I'm a huge nerd about that, I'll be honest. That's all lost through those layoffs,
Mm-hmm.
um of overhiring and then having this cycle going on. So that's, I guess, like what we're all trying to do here, where it's like if we improve sort of like the conditions in these companies already, then there's not going to be the need of either these senior level folks going like, I have like the cover letter, the CV, and also the resume to just you know jump from the ship. But also it's like, if you wanted to, you could stay and it's gonna be nice, but then also if you leave, it's gonna be nice either way. You're gonna have good labor conditions either way, is
Mm-hmm.
what we're hoping is going to happen in the long term.
Yeah, you'll
Oh,
ultimately have
do we
protections on
all
the
wish
job.
to just like snap our fingers and just have the union magically?
Well, you know, if we keep working towards it, one day we will wake up and it will be real.
That's right.
Um, McRissa says, when I worked in games, overworking was so normalized among my coworkers that you were actually called out and remembered as being lazy or bad at the job. Normalized unpaid overtime set an unhealthy standard that I see industry wide. I It sounds very familiar to an animation studio that I know and worked at, um, where if you left at 7 o'clock when your workday was over, people thought you were crazy. Um, and people would often stay until the boss left, um, because the boss also worked in the bullpen with everybody.
Drop the
which
name if you
created this like
want.
culture of fear where
Spill the
everybody was
tea.
like
I have it right here.
it created this culture of fear where like
Right.
that boss was like literally um sitting there watching you. And I remember when I was even working at that studio, I was like, I don't even want to like open up a Firefox tab because he could see my work computer and he'll see that I'm not working. And
Mm.
I ended up personally screwing myself out of money because I was there as a freelancer and because I was doing nothing but working and literally nothing else outside of like the lunch hour that I had. Um, I finished the project in a week. Like I screwed myself out of 2 weeks of pay for a project they booked me for 3 weeks for. They didn't reward me for finishing early and under budget by giving me extra pay or anything like that. They just said, "Oh, cool, thank you so much, appreciate you."
And no paper trail of the 3 week either.
No, well, I mean, I had like I'm pretty sure I had a freelancer contract. I don't remember. This was a while ago.
No,
You know,
because
we all.
like if you're feeling feisty about it, if anybody's going through like over just being overworked period, it's like you can't have it like sort of like in like make sure you have a paper trail of sort of like what it is that you agree to and you abide to what it is that you agree to. You don't do anything more, you don't do anything less, and if you don't do anything more, you're not being lazy, you're just meeting expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And
100%.
surpassing expectations, perhaps a bit of a spicy take, but if we want to get into like performance reviews, I remember someone recall or referring to them as sort of like just a capital's way of keeping the status quo. And without getting too much into it, I think they have a point. I think they have a point.
Yeah.
It's not gonna be the end of the world if like you have sort of like met expectations rather than surpass expectations.
Yeah, they can't fire you for doing your job.
They can't fire you for doing your job. Period. It's like if you and if you're
I
feeling a
mean,
little bit confident, you can say like I will surpass expectations if you give me conditions and a salary worthy of surpassing expectations. We can chat about it in private.
well, or pay me for the overtime hours at time and a half,
Mm-hmm.
because
Don't
you're
follow my
requiring
advice
that
all
of
the
me.
time, though. I was kind of joking. Like, don't actually confront people like that.
um, yeah, in a perfect world we could, but that's acting as an individual, right? And that sounds
Mm-hmm.
scary. Um, but what if we all come together to fight for those changes? They have to listen to all of us, right? Um, which talking about like those performance reviews, um, and even like terminations and layoffs, they do those in like one-on-one meetings with you so that you don't have that leverage of your coworkers by your side to stand by you and empower you to fight it. Um, so thinking about how it feels as an individual to go up against those kinds of power dynamics at work, like could we collectively petition our employers to do better when we come together? Can we do that alone? It doesn't seem likely, right? Um,
Collectively petition one of the large, if not, no, the largest industry, isn't it? In tech-wise.
yeah, I mean, in terms of like entertainment revenue, it makes 10
Mm-hmm.
times more than movies.
Yeah.
Um,
Where it's one of those where, how do I say this? There's withholding labor in film, and then there's withholding labor in games. That would have huge impact. Like what Chris is saying of sort of like the power that collective labor has. It's not. It's not sort of like underestimating or anything. It's the more you think about sort of like the numbers involved in like your labor and how much you are like giving to these sort of like organizations, the more you should like feel empowered, right? That you're very much like worth a lot as capitalist as that sounds, but also whenever you it's scary to negotiate, it's scary to bargain because you're acting solo, just as you said. But if you need, because like, there's a lot of people that say like, oh yeah, I have a comfortable salary, but technically, I'm a lead senior, and I'm like, then ask for the lead or senior salary. You don't have to be like straightforward about it, but sort of like do highlight to your employer that, hey, given that I'm very good at sort of like, putting in legalese and in like more eloquent words. Considering that my responsibilities currently meet the requirement for a lead position, I believe that my salary should meet the deliverables that I'm providing at the moment.
Love that. I'll give you it. You're promoted.
Yes.
um, but yeah, what you're kind of getting at there as well is like the idea that we can set terms around what our job title is, and when we start doing the work of another job title, we're either paid extra for the hours that we do in that job title, or we are given that title and therefore that
Hmm.
title's rate. Um,
Yeah.
we're one of the big things that um, would really be game changing for game workers as a across the board like union thing is to ultimately have standardization of wage minimums, meaning
Hmm.
like if you work at this company and you work at that company, you know that the minimum rate you can be paid is the same. Um,
Hmm.
so you build up on that over time, and you can always negotiate for more on top of that, but they can't pay you less. So if you're working
Right.
at Riot and you're getting paid X amount, and then you go get a job somewhere else, and they're like, "Well, we don't pay what Riot pays. We pay less than that." It's
Mm.
like, okay, it helps. It ultimately will help plan for if you have to make that turn in your job
Yeah.
and go somewhere else, so that you know that when you start somewhere else, you'll still be making the same amount of money. You don't have to take a pay cut.
Exactly. And the thing too, it's like there are independent studios that I think are worthy of sort of like being highlighted, uplifted, and supported because they're setting sort of like that standard. For example, I know that in Rooker Interactive, I actually saw a video of them because I've spoken with their founder and they're great people. Is highly recommend. They are disabled, trans, femme owned studio. And they all pay, regardless of whether you are, an intern, contract, external, it does not matter. The minimum is always the same, $20 across the board. This is an independent studio, like a year old studio. This is not a studio that has decades. This is not a studio that has like Anderson Horowitz, VC to it. And still, they're able to deliver that. And I think that sort of like whenever you notice studios like that, make sure you support them. And it can be for for free 99. You retweet their stuff, you share their trailers, you wish list their games,
$3.99.
because that is it's free 99. Yeah,
I'm
like
stealing that.
because if we support sort of like the people that are doing the good and sort of like what we want to be the standard, then that sort of like shows the others like, hey, I'm not gonna name which company is paying their interns $15 an hour. Look at them. Look at Recurring Interactive that does not have your funding. Why aren't you doing the same?
Yeah, setting those standards are so important.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because that will ultimately make working in games more sustainable in the long term. So that you
Yeah, and there's a
can,
lot of them that the internships don't pay the cost of living for like where they're requiring people to be for a couple
hmm
months.
yeah, they make you move to Irvine and then they give you $15 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how many roommates can I possibly fit into this apartment?
Yeah, pretty much.
Um, it's being able to grow with your career and not stagnate and not feel like you're stuck. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, so maybe we could talk a little bit about what um, is specific about games work that might make it a bit of a challenge to organize, right? Um, so one of the things that at least I've noticed, and Andrea, and I'm sure that you can also expand upon like your feelings on this subject too. Um, but a lot of game workers don't have that direct on the job comparison to
Mm-hmm.
workers who are union to say those people are getting X and I'm not getting any of that.
Yeah.
Why? Um, to say like, well, clearly I need to be union because they're getting better things than I am. There's a stark difference in how we are treated at work, um, and therefore I should do that, right? Which is something that I think that workers in visual effects and animation, they've got that direct comparison. There's workers they work alongside that are under a union contract that there is that like very stark comparison to what they're getting and what they're not
And
getting.
voice director, mocap, because they work with talent and actors that are SAG-AFTRA covered per se, they sort of like have that overlap where they know it's sort of like what SAG-AFTRA is getting versus, of course, that's complicated, and what in video games where they're not getting. Then you have, for example, there's a lot of narrative designers who actually overlap where they have, I think, dramaturgs have a different union than, or no, there's in WGA, I think. But some of them write for Hollywood and games. So
Oh,
because
okay,
of that,
yeah.
they sort of like do know about like the goods that WGA offers.
Mm-hmm.
We'll say something that does make it difficult to unionize is everyone has a very concise definition of what an actor is. I have been in this industry for a couple years. I don't think there is like a definition of what a narrative designer is. It's so different per studio.
Mm-hmm.
Got nothing but good things to say about like my, like, despite of course like the what happened. It's sort of like I was happy as a writer at Faratzis, but the fact of the matter was that I was a writer that was implementing my own content. So was that technical narrative design? Technically, where like you're creating story, characters, plot, knowing that this is going to be interactable. That's the task of a game writer. But then because you're implementing it, then that makes you a narrative designer. But also you're using an in-house game engine, so it's technical. You see where I'm getting
Wow,
at,
yeah. That you're
right?
like three things in
So,
one.
if only it was just yeah, you have to do like a little bit of everything. Like that's why every narrative designer you meet, more than likely, they know how to write scripts. So then, are you a screenwriter or are you a narrative designer? You need to know how to write scripts. You need to know how to write ambience writing. You need to know how to implement all of that in whatever game engine. So study all of the game engines because you never know which one you're gonna have. That's narrative design alone.
Wow.
And then game design. Game design is another beast too, where it's sort of like um, I've seen job listings that just say game developer, straight up, and it's like,
What?
oh yeah, no. Predominantly in Colombia, like they're just, we are looking for a game developer. We are looking for a generalist.
A
Okay,
generalist.
exactly. We know, but we don't know what a generalist is. So these are just a few examples, right? Where like we are already debating like what's a designer, what's not a designer, right? What's a narrative designer and what's not a narrative designer? What's a writer in games and what's not a writer in games? We don't have these definitions set in stone because of how, a, like in the grand scheme of things, new this industry is.
Yeah.
Film has had that time to sort of like come up with what is a mocap actor, what is a voice actor, what is an actor that is set in stone for them. We don't have that for our roles. So that's how it's different because also we're gonna need game developers to agree on something, which is a definition. Having game developers agree, that's difficult, okay? So that's what makes it like, that's an additional, challenge that we're willing to undertake, but everybody should be aware of that. Somehow we gotta have this the same across the board nationwide. And I just named sort of like things that can either happen sort of like in, the East Coast. I haven't ventured into like the other coast yet. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there can be quite a lot of differences between East and West Coast. Um,
hmm
US Ace just says headache, and I think they're referring to the idea that game developers and generalists are so general um, in what we're asking of them to do, which is literally everything. Um, Machine Kitten wanted to become a creature artist, but ended up as a game designer. Fascinating.
oh,
Um,
I love
would love
that.
to
I'm so
learn more
happy for your
about that
creator kitten.
experience, Machine Kitten. Um,
Yeah. Machine kitten, sorry. I said creature kitten.
it's
Kitten,
okay.
I'm really happy for you.
Yeah.
Be proud of that.
Um,
Embrace it.
but yeah, are there other things about like games work that present themselves to be like a challenging thing for us to want to organize?
Another thing that I can imagine being challenging is like um with game development, it's not like in Hollywood where like you have these like recognizable faces that regardless of the circle you're in, if you're like networking and you bring up the name Adam Conover, for example, in Hollywood they know who he is. And he was sort of like pretty much the voice of SAG-AFTRA, keeping everybody updated. So that's a huge tool for them because that sort of like made the media back SAG-AFTRA and sort of like all of the workers who were unionizing, rather than buying into the propaganda that the AMPTP was trying to allegedly, I'm crazy, do not listen to me, um, allegedly trying to sort of like push.
Oh no, they were
So
not
of course,
allegedly. They were very clearly in the press saying things. So,
you said it, not me. You said it. It was her. Um, but what I'm getting at is I don't really know who a figure would be to sort of like that everybody knows this person. That's not Kojima, right? It would be difficult to bring Kojima all the way to the stage, kind of, and
yeah,
just
that'd
kind
be
of like
sick though.
have him read,
That'd be so cool.
right? Or like where that's like sort of like you'd have to get like essentially these executives, to be in the strike with you if we have to get to that point, right? Um and there's a few figures here and there that have like a huge community and a huge following in spaces like Twitter, spaces like LinkedIn. But that's the thing, it's like if you are only on Twitter/Blue Sky, then you know of like these three people that are very popular, right? In those because they have a huge platform that they deserve. And then if you're only on LinkedIn, then you know of like this handful of people that are, very active on it and sort of like, are regularly posting and have the algorithm on their side. So it's like the person who's only on LinkedIn will not know. No, the person that's only on Twitter will not know about the person on LinkedIn sometimes, and the person who's only on LinkedIn will have no idea about what's going on Twitter and Blue Sky. So finding like the figure that sort of like can be the Adam Conover of gaming, that I think is also a challenge, just because it was like so it helped SAG-AFTRA so much. Um, and it's not a need, but just consolidating media and just keeping that updated all the time. Because WGA, and IGN, I think recently, they got their unionizing in. Um, I'd say that Rebecca did a great job, sort of at like highlighting, and just boosting it. Um, so again, it's like you have sort of like people spearheading it, um, and in gaming, it's sort of like
I nominate
we're
you.
so spread across the platforms that it's difficult to have like one person just sort of like broadcast to all of them, right? That's
You
what
should
I'm
do
trying to
it.
get at.
I'm in favor of you.
No, 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 please, no.
How about Machine Kitten? Sword Brother Sorios? Anybody?
Yeah,
Alina?
any volunteers?
Um, Alina, you're bringing up the contract versus employee thing. I think what you're talking about, and forgive me if I'm mistaken, is that is a challenge for organizing in games. And Um, I can 100% agree with you on that. That contract workers, that while they can't necessarily be um, a part of, I'm gonna screw this up. Um, but ultimately, what we would want to do within a contract for game workers is to ultimately protect those workers too. To write language around protecting contract workers, because that is what entertainment work is. That's
Mm-hmm.
working in animation, that's working in film, that's working in television. It's all project based and contract based. So it's not that we can't protect them. It's not that we can't write language in our contracts to help. Um, though they might not be eligible voters in a union vote, at least the first time. Um, but McRissa, as an 839 member, can definitely speak to that. I can also speak to that as an 839 member. Um, yes, we do have examples of contractors organizing and unionizing in animation. She heard me call to her and she answered in the chat. So yeah, that a great thing to bring up, Alina. But let's use our contract worker and co-workers as fuel to our fire to organize at
Mm-hmm.
our workplace and make sure that they get a union protection too. Um, and then Machines Kitten brought up their story. I got sick of waiting around for someone else to create what I really wanted, so I decided to start my own project. That's sick. And now I need to know the basis of pretty much everything to direct everyone. You did a good thing and you got rewarded with more work, just like Marissa was saying. I suppose I'm technically a game director, but ow, I have so many
There you
roles
go.
and 20 people that join me in my vision, so I just fell into it. I mean, that's awesome that you're starting your own project. That's really sick.
Yeah.
Congratulations to you on that. Um,
I actually, when I mentioned that I'm a project manager, I asked sort of like the game director of the, game that project manager for contract and great conditions. Um, and they went that, oh yeah, I don't have any experience in games before, but I just know that I really like this genre of games and I want it. So the genre of games is a multiplayer like dinosaur game. And so they noticed that there were things that they wanted to see in those games, which, mind you, like for anybody who doesn't know, like multiplayer games, if you play Helldivers, you'll realize how difficult they are. So they are making it from scratch, entirely backed by Kickstarter. Like, that's crazy to me that somebody just has no experience but just went ahead, and I'm just like, I love that for you, and you bet your ass that I'm gonna sort of like help you get through the finish line.
yeah,
Um, yeah.
I love dinosaur games too, Machine Kitten. Dinosaurs are the
So
best.
shameless plug, but Untamed is the name of the game.
Untamed.
If anybody's interested, by Solar Vault Studios.
Let's check that
They're doing
out.
great stuff there. Yeah.
Um, love a good game, especially dinosaurs. Um, I used to play some like Jurassic Park mobile game. I was obsessed with it. Loved it. It was like Dinosaur Tycoon from like, oh boy, I'm
Oh
aging
yeah, that's
myself.
cool.
Um, loved Dinosaur Tycoon. Um, Sword Brother Sorios is working on one MOBA esque project that has a jumping button. Imagine playing League of Legends but with a jump ability. Wait, does
Oh,
League of Legends not have jump?
you didn't know?
I have not played it. I will be straight
No.
honest.
Stay like that,
Okay,
please.
I
Remain
will.
like that,
I'll be
please.
untainted.
Maintain, yes, maintain your innocence.
um,
I
Machine
cannot
Kitten
get
says
mine
like the
back because I
parks.
played League of Legends in like the Latin American North servers as a woman. Yeah, it was an experience.
Oh, never go full
Mm.
MOBA. League of Legends
Mm-mm.
ruins Unity. uh,
If we want to be unionized, we cannot play League. I'm so sorry if anybody from Riot is tuning in. I love y'all, but also, listen, back in 2013, your servers were provided character growth and thick skin, which help in the workplace. So thank
wow.
you.
Um, I think that might be a topic for another stream. Is you know, the community of players
Mm.
and how
Mm.
they can um, either support or
I was about to say, what kind of players are we talking about?
or protecting
Um,
ourselves
yeah.
against
Mhm.
like
Thank you.
devious players. I love the random hand coming in to pat you on the head. I wish I
Oh
had one
yeah,
of
my
those.
husband. Um, he's part of the brand at this one because every sort of like presence that I make online, period, he always appears from the ether.
I love it.
Hello, I am from the ether.
Hmm. There we go. He was playing the Dungeons and Dragons.
That's
Was.
fantastic.
Oh yeah, you're still playing. Have fun.
Um, so maybe we could touch on one more thing before we got to wrap up today.
Hmm.
But talking about what does a future with a games union look like?
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Perfectly timed. See, technically,
Um,
you have two guests rather
it's
than just
great. I
one.
love
It's
it.
two in one.
The
Yeah.
more the
Um,
merrier.
exactly. But I mean, I know that a lot of people took note of, I believe, the protections that the union members during in Microsoft, I think was it, and during the ABK layoffs, the certain employees like that were part of the union were either not as affected. I don't want to misquote. That's why I'm like hesitating.
So Activision had layoffs,
Mm-hmm.
which none of the currently organized workers were laid off, which,
Mm.
um, you know, is awesome. I don't know, like, yeah, I don't know much about how the layoffs went down over there. Like, the organized workforce at Activision Blizzard is like it's almost entirely quality insurance.
Yes.
Um, so maybe the layoffs were not in the quality assurance sector. So was it, you know, um, was it because they were union or was it because they weren't laying off quality assurance workers? Like it's unsure. I'm
Yeah.
unfortunately not read up on it fully, um, but yeah, it is a huge it's a huge thing to have the ability to negotiate around terminations and layoffs. Um,
Which not a lot of people are familiar with. Like, I think that during I used to refrain from using this word, but I can't find one other than this one, which is the trauma. That is, you have lost your insurance, your healthcare, your livelihood, your next paycheck, because you don't even. I mean, I didn't even know what a severance paycheck was. Um, to the point that I don't even know it in my first language, right? So I didn't know what that was. I didn't know what would happen to me, and I just sort of like was paralyzed in the moment and more worried, weirdly enough, about the project than myself. But that just shows my work ethic. And people don't realize that lawyers are an option. Like, there are people that make a living and dedicate themselves to just helping out, ensure that, like, when a termination happens, either you might be able to have like a negotiation. There's always a third option, right? Um, or maybe you can take it to court in the worst of cases. But what was the? I believe the Bioshock devs were the ones that sort of like pushed for legal action because of their termination, and um, those are the ones that publicly I know of. I know that there's other people who are seeking legal representation, but it's one of those like rumors, hearsays you hear like on online communities.
yeah, I mean the thing about that is that you know lawyers cost money.
Mm.
So once you've been laid off, are you willing to risk a legal case? by paying a
because
lawyer
most
out of your own pocket and possibly not winning. You know, taking an individual legal approach to a layoff is like, again, it's like another hurdle in the way that prevents you from protecting yourself on the job. But, you know, in the instance that you were terminated wrongfully, and you're protected by a union, the legal staff of that union is there to represent you and protect you, and that's what your dues go towards. So it's not up to you to pay out of pocket for a lawyer to represent you in court, or to get you reinstated on your job, or to pay for back pay. It's up to you and your union. Alina brings up pensions and royalties and wanting to retire one day, and 100%, Alina, pensions are, they're a much better guarantee of being able to retire with dignity than a 401k is, considering how rocky the stock market is. And we definitely all want to be able to retire one day. We shouldn't have to be working till we're 70, 80 years old, till we're literally rolling into our grave.
high yield savings accounts, though it's very small, sort of like the percentage, but like if you start sort of like as soon as you can, like you can sort of like basically put your money and then it sort of like increments over time.
Yeah, and you know, I'm not suggesting that there aren't other ways to save for retirement too. But a company sponsored pension plan, it's helped countless entertainment workers retire with dignity at the age of 65.
And residuals too.
And residuals. So, you know, residuals are a huge thing, I think, that game workers want. But again, without the ability to negotiate with your employer, you don't have the ability to ask for residuals. You know, I mean, you might, maybe you do, maybe you're a literal rock star game developer and you can go to your boss and be like, give me royalties for this game, and they will be like, yes sir, please, anything you want, I will give it to you because you are the best.
When did they stop? I feel like royalties used to happen, didn't they?
In games?
Yeah.
I don't know. They might have.
I think I heard that this morning in a call where like there were game developers who I won't name because then I'd be sort of like showing their age. But maybe I'm just sort of like it was early in the morning, so maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I'm not personally familiar with any games that got royalties, but I'll definitely have to look into that, because if that's true, I'd love to know that. Because again, if that standard has been set before, we can use that as precedence moving forward, right?
Curious now.
Evil Death Crab says, customer service and QA were the two largest coast centers at Blizzard, so I'm certain someone had their eye on cutting some folks there. It's going to be impossible to say for certain, but the reductions were all across the organization, so it is a big mess. Yeah. There was an article that came out stating that no current union employees were laid off during that cut, so it's for certain that no one at their like two QA studios like Raven Software and Blizzard Albany were affected in the layoffs. But again, like I don't know, I don't work there. But yeah, Marissa says with a union you have field representatives who check in with workers at studios on a regular basis to help you out. It's helpful to have those check-ins. Sometimes they find something that you didn't realize was against the contract. Absolutely, Marissa. And that's another thing that your dues go towards, is like the upholding of your contract, because your boss has no incentive after they've signed it to follow it. So we have to make sure that they do.
And also just get friends that freelance, honestly, because these are people that sort of like have to navigate the world with a lot of contracts. And so I'm not saying to, like show your NDA, but I am saying that like if you just get a vibe, the slightest one even, that something probably isn't what it should be, just check up with friends that have been either in contract work for a long time or have been in freelancing, because more than likely they will be able to tell you sort of like, oh yeah, that's pretty standard, up to sort of like, yeah, that's weird. Right? And speaking of, some developers active in the late 80s did receive royalties for a time. So I did. That's
Oh,
why I
good to
didn't want to say
know.
which game developer, because I would have clocked their age.
That's good to know. I'm gonna have to look. Can you send me that on Discord so I can look at that too?
Yeah, I mean, this is from Bing, so I'll probably get a better result. Like, sorry to throw shade on, browsers.
Oh no, not my browsers. Um. Anyway, I unfortunately need to end the stream. But
It's been lovely, though.
Andrea, it was so amazing having you. Please come back. Please. It was fantastic having you here. You're such a great person to talk to, and I've learned so much from you. So let's keep talking.
We've had royalties before.
Yeah.
That's a good sign.
This was a great stream. Thank you to everybody in the chat. The mods and the new folks. Love seeing you here. Hope you tune in again next week. Same time, same place. Also, check us out at GDC this year. We're going to have a booth and we've got a big panel. If you scan that QR code in the corner of your screen, it will take you to the panel page on the GDC website where you can find out where we're at and what time. But it will be on March 20th at 3:30.
Yes.
And we will see you all either there or here. And if not, we'll see you sometime in the future.
In stream.
Right,
And I'll be going to GDC, so any and all coffees for a Colombian are heavily appreciated.
Yes.
So
Come say hi and meet us on the floor. But we'll see you all again next week.
See ya.
Bye.